Hello and welcome, dear students. Today we are going to discuss an important topic, that is Aristotle's classification of government. The main objectives of this lecture are to understand Aristotle's classification of government, to explain with features the 6 forms of government, to examine 3 ideal forms and 3 perverted forms formulated by Aristotle, to highlight the role of the constitution of the formation of government, and to emphasize the need of balance and moderation in the formation of the government. The Greek philosopher Aristotle paid close attention to the study of government and its different forms and their complexities in the iconic work Politics. His ideas on the constitution and the various kinds of governance are closely related. He compared politics with other fields of study like gymnastics, medicine, and shipbuilding by bringing it within the scope of theoretical study that called for a systematic examination of the states or polis. He used comparative method to study 157 constitutions of his times to base his classification of governments. Aristotle states that state is a community writ large that exists for the sake of good life. Since being the highest form of association, it aims at a good in greater degree than any other association. Aristotle defines this good as the virtue of happiness of the whole community. He stated that a state exists not for the sake of life only, but for the sake of good life. He goes on to state that had life being the only object, slaves and wild animals might have established state, but they have not because, believes Aristotle, they have no share in happiness or in life of free choice. For Aristotle, state serves a basic purpose of human existence. It enhances human happiness and freedom. The structure of a state is determined by its constitution, and Aristotle defines constitution as an arrangement of political offices that effectively determine who shall be allowed to participate in ruling a state. If number of persons who rule is changed, the structure of the state changes. But Aristotle's classification of governments involves more than mere number. He believes that the purpose of rule or the end of governance is fundamental principle to classify governments. Aristotle was aware that governments can take many different forms, each of which may be suitable under specific circumstances. Therefore, illustrated the need of having an advanced knowledge of government. In doing so, he illustrated 3 fundamental branches that act as vital components of every constitution: the deliberative, the magisterial, and the judicial. The combination of these elements determines how a state is governed. The significance of statesmen and legislators having extensive awareness of what is practicable in a given socio-political context is emphasized by Aristotle's inquiry into practical wisdom. For instance, decisions about war, peace, alliance, laws, and the selection of magistrates are made by deliberative element. But the governing structures can develop depending on how deliberative, magisterial, and judicial activities are divided. For instance, a democracy is where all citizens collectively decide on issues. It tends towards aristocracy if certain features are governed by particular magistrates. It exemplifies a balanced constitutional government where discussions are available to all citizens, but some powers are reserved for magistrates. In part 3rd of Politics, Aristotle delves into the 6 forms of government, their characteristics and their potential perversions. His classification is essentially based on 2 fundamental principles. 1. Number of persons in whom the judicial and legislative powers are concentrated. And second, whether those who hold the legislative and judicial offices use them for self-interest or the common good. But Aristotle also stressed on the quality of the government as one of the principles that affects the forms of government. By applying the two principles, we get a six-fold classification of the constitutions: three good forms and the three perverted forms of governments. Aristotle regards monarchy, aristocracy, and polity as the good forms of government, while as tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy are regarded as perverted or bad forms of governments. The three good constitutions are differentiated from the three perverted forms of constitutions on the basis of justice. Good constitutions are good because the rulers, whether one, few, or many, rule justly for the common good. Similarly, perverted governments are bad because the rulers rule unjustly for the sake of their selfish interests. Aristotle is clear that it is not the form of the government that matters. Rather, it is the purpose and aim of the government that brings goodness or badness to the government. One person's rule can be good if it enhances common good, and rule of many persons can be bad if it is unjust and selfish. Aristotle has not only listed these six categories but has immensely dealt with these different shades of these forms of government. For instance, he has discussed 5 different types of kingship, 5 types of democracy, 4 types of oligarchy, and several types of polities and tyrannies. Aristotle acknowledges that there exist many variations on governments than those that he addressed. He ascribes this diversity to the wide range of components that make up a state as a whole. He further, in a compelling manner, drew similarity between the diversity of governmental structures and the diversity of animal species in the natural world. He compared how various combinations of vital organs give rise to various animal species to how the particular arrangement of components such as people, rulers, laws, and classes inside a state give rise to various systems of government. The classification of Aristotle offers a sound framework for understanding the many types of governance, their fundamental traits, potential drawbacks, and virtues. His great understanding of political philosophy and government is reflected in his comprehensive understanding of political systems. Now we will discuss the best practicable government. But among the 6 forms of government, which government should be treated as the best practicable government? Aristotle has strongly pleaded his case for polity being the best practicable form of government for various reasons. Some of the reasons can be: since state exists for the sake of good life, therefore, good is that many people should rule rather than all or few. If all are allowed to rule, the virtue gets sacrificed, and if only few are allowed to rule, the collective wisdom is sacrificed. Sacrificing virtue or collective wisdom is bad, and justice cannot bring bad results. Therefore, Aristotle believes that all other alternatives have tendency, except that of polity, to lead to bad results. Any form of government that may lead to bad results cannot be just because justice cannot bring bad. Therefore, it is quite unrealistic to opt for a government that may bring bad results. The fundamental characteristic of polity is that it assembles the good qualities which are scattered among the different individuals and combine them for the good of all. Polity, Aristotle states, is a fusion of oligarchic and democratic principles, hence a balanced government based on the principle of golden mean. The social base for such a state is provided by a large middle class composed of those who are neither too rich nor too poor, but average, and it is this class that provides stability to the state. The quality of this class is that they are neither too poor to be degraded nor rich enough to be factious. This combination, from one hand, provides states with the popular foundation by bringing in large segment of the population. On the other hand, it brings in the virtue and ability of the rich elite. Further, Aristotle states that the greater share of authority should be exercised by those who contribute most to the state. Since this class contributes the most, therefore, they should exercise most of the authority. Polity, it can be said, is a just blend of quality provided by the oligarchs and quantity provided by the democracy. Polity is also best practicable government, for it values collective wisdom. Aristotle believes that virtue and ability of the whole is greater than any part. Further, Aristotle believes that a large body is not easily corrupted. Aristotle believes that governments have tendencies of degeneration, therefore, if stretched to extremes, degenerate into perverted ones. For instance, democracy and oligarchy have tendency to degenerate into tyranny, which is bad and unstable. Democracy, if stretched to the maximum, gives rise to the tyranny of mob. Similarly, if oligarchy is stretched to become more oligarchic, there is every chance that it can be governed by an oppressive faction. The over-centralization of power within the monarchy can jeopardize and exclude a wider range of public opinions and be oppressive. Aristocracy is also susceptible to the dangers of elitism. Oppression by a faction or oppression by a mob is unjust and bad. In light of this, Aristotle's praise of polity as one of the finest forms of government reflects its capacity to lessen the drawbacks seen in the substitute systems. Further, polity, being the mixed form of government, provides stability, which is one of the essential characteristics of a state. The mixture of oligarchy and democracy prevents a state from reaching to any of the extremes mentioned. A just and effective society must basically preserve this intricate equilibrium in order to exist. The goal of polity is to foster a sense of social stability and security in society by ensuring that the most vital social groupings have significant roles to play in the administration of the state. The polity, when evaluated against the difficulties of other forms of the government, promotes a form of government in which members of various social groups take an active part, helping to create a more just and efficient political system. Polity as a flexible system of government that can change to meet the demands of the society as the environment demands. It can adapt to the complexity of varied citizenry by allowing for numerous interests and means of integration. By allowing involvement and representation from both wealthy and less wealthy populace, it encourages a feeling of engagement and belonging among citizens. The fabric of polity aspires to a society in which the moral standards of the ruling class are the same as those of the ideal citizen. The best rulers are those with virtues of integrity and ideal character. In a polity, virtuous leaders execute the roles of both administrators and moral custodians of the state. Their moral behavior serves as a model for other citizens, fostering a climate of integrity and social duty. This, therefore, contributes to the society's general well-being. Aristotle correctly recognizes the danger that family groupings pose in an oligarchic structure. These factions frequently develop as a result of the concentration of money and influence in a small number of powerful families. Due to their financial resources, these oligarchies may seem strong on the surface, but they are intrinsically vulnerable to a number of serious problems. Polity offers a system of checks and balances and also restrains the excessive domination of any one group. It distributes power evenly and makes sure that no one group, especially affluent families, have control over major resources. Another consequence of checks and balance is that it prevents tyranny. As it aligns with the concept of just and equitable governance, the emergence of tyrannical tendencies are dispelled during the process. Lastly, the dependence, cooperation, and active involvement of citizens make polity self-sustaining, as it doesn't have to rely on outside force or foreign assistance. The participation of the people in government greatly enhances the success of the state. But how can polity be organized? Aristotle, after discussing in length the virtues of the polity, turns to the mode of its establishment. Since polity is the fusion of democracy and oligarchy, therefore it becomes imperative to understand the basic virtues of these forms of government. Once acquainted with these virtues, can we be able to decide their amalgamation? The distinguishing features of the two forms can be taken into consideration before bringing in any sort of fusion. For democracy, Aristotle mentions two essential features of number and freedom. Aristotle begins by discussing the number component that separates democracy from oligarchy. He argues that, contrary to popular belief, democracy should not be primarily defined in terms of numerical majorities. In a democratic administration, it is not the simple majority of voters that are important, but free citizens, even if they are in minority. The authority is determined by the law of the free, no matter how many there are. In a sense, political power is held by those who have the status of free citizens, and this is what defines a democracy. In contrast, oligarchy is a form of government where wealthy have control. Aristotle emphasized that the significance of freedom is a characteristic separating oligarchy from democracy. The rule of the free is what defines a democracy. However, within democratic states, the degree of freedom may vary depending upon the political rights or citizenship rights. Oligarchy is characterized by power of the affluent class, albeit there may be variations in the class's degree of freedom. For example, some oligarchies may impose tougher limits or privileges based on money. Others may grant greater freedom to the wealthy elite. Regardless of the variances in personal freedoms, oligarchies are primarily recognized by the concentration of political power among the wealthy. Wealth may dictate individual status and power in a democratic society, but wealth is not the only factor to consider when choosing the type of government. Democracy allows for the rule of free citizens, and wealthy individuals can hold positions of authority. Wealth does not always become a criterion for a government, making it eligible for democracy, but it is by the presence of free citizens in positions of authority. Similarly, affluent elite controls society in oligarchies. However, whether a government is an oligarchy is not determined by the sheer quantity of the wealthy people. The distinguishing characteristic is the predominance of the rich elite in governance and decision making. Oligarchies can have different levels of wealth concentration, but the power held by the wealthy is what makes them distinct. Aristotle suggests three modes and patterns of combination from which polity can spring up. Syncretism of oligarchy and democracy, meaning thereby making both forms sing together by finding a middle path. Mean between the enactments of the two, meaning thereby if oligarchies require a high priority qualification from members of the assembly, while democracies require no or very low. A mean between the two can be achieved for fusing the two. borrowing from each, meaning thereby some elements will be taken from oligarchy and some from democracy. For example, a democratic education system with some oligarchic principle. Now, Aristotle talks about revolutions and the causes of revolution. Aristotle believes that governments are always based on some kind of justice. For instance, democracy believes in equality, while as oligarchy is based on the notion that those who are unequal in one respect are in all respects unequal. Under both systems, there remains a good chunk of people who think their rights have been vandalized. This thinking compels them for revolution. Aristotle categorizes revolution into two categories. One, when the constitution is changed, when democracy is changed into oligarchy, or oligarchy into democracy, or both onto polity, or when monarchy is changed into tyranny, aristocracy into oligarchy, or vice versa. Revolutions are said to have occurred. Aristotle defines revolution as any major or minor change in the government is a revolution. If democracy becomes less or more democratic, or oligarchy becomes less or more oligarchic, it will be termed as revolution. Second type of revolution occurs when the ruling elites are changed without disturbing the constitutional setup. In such revolutions, governments remain the same, only ruling elites are replaced. Aristotle has extensively elaborated the concept of revolution and the causes responsible for them. The causes are different in different forms of governments. However, we will be content with the general cause of the revolution. Aristotle believes that the universal cause of revolution is the desire of equality, that is, when people think they are equal to others who wield higher positions and ranks than them. The desire brings democratic revolutions. Similarly, the desire of inequality and superiority can lead to revolutions. When people believe that they are superior to the rest and their superiority should be accepted and established. This desire of superiority can turn democracy into oligarchy or aristocracy or even into a monarchy. Therefore, governments where such feelings are harbored are more susceptible to revolutions. Aristotle, in his political and ethical views, is frequently seen as a realist and a moderate who continually sought balance and moderation. He acknowledges the operational complexity of governance in his analysis of various kinds of government. He underlines how crucial it is to strike the ideal balance between constitutional ideals and governmental systems. His golden mean is the idea of moderation in which he consistently questions of a well-ordered state. This fundamental tenet of this golden mean exhorts people and societies to refrain from extremes and strive for moderation in their deeds and judgments. Aristotle's support for a balanced constitution that balanced the authority of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches shows his moderation in politics. Aristotle's pragmatic approach to politics acknowledges the complexities of governance. He searches for equilibrium to reach the common good, is a strong example of his realist and moderate approach. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it well. Thank you for watching.